Why did the room go quiet the moment she stepped inside? It wasn't dramatic. No one stood. No one stared openly. But the air shifted in a way she'd learned to recognize long before she ever wore a uniform. Conversations tapered off. A joke died mid-sentence. Chairs stopped scraping. A dozen trained men recalculated the room without meaning to. Lieutenant Hale felt it hit her like a change in pressure. She didn't react. She walked to the far end of the briefing table and took the only empty chair, setting her folder down with measured calm. No rush. No hesitation. The kind of movement that said she was used to walking into places she didn't belong and staying anyway. She was smaller than most of them, but not slight. Compact. Dense. The kind of build that came from carrying weight the right way, not the loud way. Her hair was pulled into a regulation bun so tight it looked painful. Her sleeves were crisp. Her boots clean but broken in. Nothing about her suggested softness. Nothing invited commentary. Still it came. "That's her," someone muttered from the middle of the table. Another voice followed, lower, amused. Commands getting creative. Kept her eyes on the projected satellite image. A compound in sun-bleached nothingness. Flat roofs. Outbuildings. The kind of place that collected secrets because no one bothered looking too closely. She listened, not to the briefing, but to what wasn't being said. Commander Holt finished his rundown and let the room breathe for half a second. Then his gaze landed on her. Not unkind, just assessing. "Lieutenant Hale will be handling K-9 support for this operation," he said. The silence that followed was heavier than before. A chair creaked. Someone exhaled through their nose. "With respect, sir," a senior operator said, raising a hand without waiting to be called on. "Our usual handler's still out. We've worked with him for years. Dogs don't just switch." Didn't look at him. Holt didn't blink. "This isn't a discussion." Another voice, sharper, edged with humor, that was, "What dog?" That one landed. Lifted her eyes. "He's already on base," she said, her voice even. "Belgian Atlas." For a beat no one spoke. Then laughter, short, incredulous. "Atlas?" someone echoed. "You mean the one who put 3 handlers in medical?" "Crushed a guy's forearm," another added. "Tore a bite sleeve clean through." Felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Not fear, not anger. Memory. She'd been warned about this. About them. About the way skepticism dressed itself up as concern. About how failure was expected of her before she ever moved. "You're telling us," the senior operator said now, leaning forward, elbows on the table, "that you're bringing a liability dog into a live op. With us." Turned her head slowly and met his eyes. "I'm telling you," she said, "that Atlas isn't a liability, he's a mirror." That got a reaction. A few eyebrows lifted, a few smirks faded. "A mirror," the man repeated. "That's cute." "It's accurate," she replied. "He reflects how he's handled." Someone scoffed. "He's unstable." No said, "He's unanchored." Holt watched her closely now. She continued, measured, careful not to preach. Atlas was trained aggressively without continuity. 4 handlers, 4 styles, no consistent bond. That doesn't create obedience. It creates confusion. Confusion turns into fear. Fear turns into teeth. The table was quiet. One of the younger SEALs shifted in his seat. "So you're saying it's our fault?" Shook her head. "I'm saying it's no one's fault, but it is everyone's responsibility." The senior operator leaned back, unimpressed. "Dogs don't care about philosophy. They care about control." Nodded once. "So do people." That ended it. Holt cleared his throat. "We don't have time for debates. Hale, you'll demonstrate Atlas's readiness tomorrow morning. Full team present." Someone laughed again. "You sure you want an audience?" Met Holt's eyes. "Yes, sir." Because this was always how it happened. She rose from the table, collected her folder, and walked out with her spine straight and her pulse steady. Only once the door closed behind her did she exhale. Outside, the base hummed with motion. Boots on concrete, engines starting. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, sharp, territorial. She headed toward the K-9 facility. Atlas heard her before he saw her. The growl rolled low and warning through the kennel, vibrating metal. He paced, nails clicking against concrete, body coiled and ready. His amber eyes tracked every movement beyond the chain-link fence. Stopped 6 feet away. She didn't speak. Didn't reach. Didn't meet his stare. She turned sideways and lowered herself to sit on the ground, back against the wall, hands resting loosely on her knees. Non-threatening. Still. Minutes passed. Atlas barked once sharp, then again, then circled. Breath slowly, deliberately, letting her pulse settle where he could feel it. Not hear it, not see it, but sense it. Dogs always knew. "I know," she said quietly finally. "You don't trust me yet." The growl softened, just a fraction. "You've been asked to obey without being understood," she continued. "That makes anyone dangerous." She reached into her bag, not toward him but toward the space between them, and placed a worn cloth on the ground. No sudden movements. The scent did the rest. Atlas froze. His head tilted, his breathing changed. Confusion rippled through him, replacing aggression with something older. Swallowed. She hadn't planned this part, hadn't known if it would work. But hope, quiet, treacherous hope, slipped in anyway. "That's right," she whispered. "You remember." Atlas stepped closer. His posture shifted, not submissive, not dominant. "Searching." She extended her hand, palm down. He hesitated, then pressed his nose to her fingers. The growl disappeared. Closed her eyes. For a moment the noise of the bass faded. The doubt, the laughter, the challenge. It was just her and the dog. "You're not broken," she murmured. "You were just passed around like equipment." Atlas leaned into her touch, tentative but real. Behind them, unseen, a pair of operators stood watching in silence. One of them muttered, almost to himself, "What the hell?" Didn't notice. She was already counting the seconds. Because tomorrow, they wouldn't just be testing the dog. They'd be testing her. And she knew exactly how this would go. They would push. They would provoke. They would force a showdown they expected her to lose. But there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Atlas wasn't just trained. He was hers. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the room isn't teeth or muscle or rank. Sometimes it's quiet control, finally given space to act. Why did they insist on watching her fail instead of letting her work? The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the K-9 training field was already crowded. Too crowded. Noticed it the moment she stepped onto the gravel. Too many boots, too many crossed arms, too many eyes waiting for something to go wrong. This wasn't a routine evaluation. This was a spectacle. Atlas walked at her side, leashed but calm, his ears rotating independently as he tracked sound and scent. His gait was smooth now, tension mostly bled off but not gone. He felt the pressure too. Dogs always did. He could smell skepticism the way humans smelled rain. Someone near the back muttered, "Place your bets." Didn't look. She stopped at the center of the field and faced Commander Holt. The rest of the team formed a loose semicircle behind him, operators in training gear, a few instructors, one medic already wearing gloves like he expected to need them. That stung more than it should have. "Rules are simple," Holt said. "Atlas completes a standard obedience and stress response course. No protective gear. No muzzle. If he shows uncontrolled aggression, we pull him. If he fails commands, we pull him." "And if he succeeds?" asked. Holt held her gaze. "Then he deploys." A pause. "And if you fail," he added. Nodded, "Then you pull me." A ripple went through the group. That wasn't part of the script. Someone laughed quietly, bold. Unclipped the leash. That got their attention. Atlas stayed at heel, eyes forward, waiting, not frozen, not rigid, ready. Knelt beside him and rested her forehead briefly against his. Not dramatic, not for show, just grounding for both of them. "You don't have to prove anything," she whispered. "Just listen." She stood. "Begin," Holt said. The first commands were simple: sit, down, stay, recall. Atlas executed each one cleanly. Not robotic, not hesitant, fluid, confident, precise. His focus never wavered from, even when someone deliberately dropped a metal baton behind him. He flinched, but he didn't break. Felt the tremor through the ground, through the leash she no longer held, through the space between them. She gave no correction, no praise, just steadiness. That steadiness mattered. They moved into the obstacle section. Tight corridors, elevated walkways, confined spaces designed to trigger stress responses. Atlas hesitated once at the narrow tunnel, nostrils flaring, muscles tightening. Didn't rush him. She waited. That alone caused murmurs. Why isn't she pushing him? He's going to bolt. Crouched at the entrance of the tunnel and tapped the ground lightly. "Your pace," she said, "not theirs." Atlas lowered his head and went through. Clean. On the other side, his tail flicked once, quick, unconscious. Felt pride bloom and crushed it immediately. Pride made people sloppy. The final phase was the one they'd all been waiting for. Controlled aggression response. A suited decoy stepped onto the field, padded from throat to shin, carrying a bite sleeve. He moved erratically, shouting, waving his arms. Atlas locked on instantly. Energy surged through him. His pulse spiked. This was the line. "Hold," she commanded. Atlas froze, every muscle engaged, teeth bared. Seconds stretched. The decoy advanced. Atlas growled low warning. Didn't raise her voice. "Hold." The decoy lunged. "Engage," Holt snapped before she could stop him. Atlas launched. Perfect form, clean bite, immediate release on command. The decoy staggered back, laughing in disbelief. Hell of a dog. Barely heard him. She was watching Atlas's eyes. Still locked on her. Still listening. "Recall," she said. Atlas returned to heel, breathing hard but controlled. The field went quiet. No cheers, no applause. Just reassessment. Holt exhaled slowly, run complete. Someone swore under their breath. But skepticism didn't die easily. They didn't dismiss the group. They added pressure. Someone accidentally brushed too close. Another raised his voice. A third dropped a smoke canister to test Atlas's reaction. Atlas startled. Felt it, a spike of anxiety ripple through him. She stepped forward immediately, placing herself between Atlas and the noise. No command, just presence. Atlas settled. That's when the senior operator from the briefing stepped out. The one with the sharp eyes and sharper tongue. "Looks good," he said, "but that's training. Dogs behave when things are predictable." Turned to face him. "You want unpredictable." His smile widened. "I want honest." He nodded to the decoy. Without warning, the decoy rushed directly. Atlas reacted instantly. Dropped to one knee and gave a single sharp command. "Down." Atlas skidded to a halt inches from the decoy. The silence afterward was absolute. Stood slowly, heart hammering now. "That," she said, voice steady despite it, "is control." The operator studied Atlas, then her. "You're betting our lives on a dog that almost tore someone apart." Met his gaze without flinching. "No, I'm betting them on trust." Holt stepped in before it could escalate further. "Enough." The crowd began to disperse, but the looks had changed. Curiosity replacing certainty. respect creeping in uninvited. As they walked off the field, Atlas brushed against leg, grounding her. "You did good," she murmured, not to inflate him but to acknowledge effort. She didn't notice the man watching from the fence line. A K-9 instructor, older, weathered, someone who trained dogs long before doctrine changed. He approached quietly. "You didn't dominate him." Shook her head. "I partnered with him." The instructor nodded once. "That scares people." She smiled faintly. "Good." Later, alone in the kennel area, sat cross-legged on the concrete floor while Atlas chewed contentedly on a training tug. Her hands trembled now that it was over. The delay always came after. She pressed her palms together, breathing through it. Because tomorrow, Atlas would deploy. And tonight, doubt crept in. What if today was a fluke? What if the field wasn't the real test? What if she failed him when it mattered most? Atlas lifted his head and rested it on her knee. She laughed softly, a little broken. "Yeah, I know." She leaned down and rested her forehead against his. Outside the kennel, Boots passed. Voices. Plans being made without her input yet, but not around her anymore. She'd earned space. But space came with responsibility. And as the sun dipped toward the horizon, understood something clearly. Tomorrow wasn't about proving she belonged. Tomorrow was about proving she could carry the weight of being trusted by a team that didn't want to give it, and a dog who already had. Sometimes resilience didn't roar. Sometimes it waited. And then it held the line. Why did the silence before the mission feel heavier than the noise of doubt ever had? Night settled over the base with deceptive calm, the kind that made everything look manageable from a distance. Lights glowed soft along the perimeter. The ocean wind carried salt and diesel and something metallic that always seemed to follow operations like this. Preparations happened without drama, no speeches, no bravado, just quiet efficiency. Men checking gear, weapons laid out, assembled, disassembled, assembled again. Muscle memory doing what nerves couldn't. Sat on the concrete floor of the kennel corridor, back against the wall, Atlas between her knees. She ran her fingers slowly through the fur along his neck, not to soothe him, but to steady herself. His breathing was even. Calm. Too calm, maybe. Dogs didn't anticipate the way humans did. They lived in the moment until the moment arrived. She that. Across the corridor, the senior operator, the one who challenged her in the briefing, leaned against a support beam, pretending not to watch. His helmet rested at his feet. His rifle leaned against the wall. He'd removed his gloves, flexing his hands as if working out stiffness. "You ready?" he asked finally. Didn't look up. "As ready as I'll ever be." He considered that. "That dog's good." She allowed herself a small nod. "He's honest." A pause. "You still nervous?" Her hand stilled on Atlas's fur. "Yes," she said. "If I ever stop being nervous, that's when you should worry." That earned a quiet exhale from him, almost a laugh. He pushed off the wall. "We roll in 20. When he walked away, pressed her forehead briefly against Atlas's head. This was the part no one talked about. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of making the wrong call, of hesitating when action was needed, of acting when restraint was required. Dogs didn't wrestle with that. Handlers did. She clipped Atlas's ballistic vest into place, adjusted the straps, checked the small camera mounted near his shoulder. Her movements were slow, deliberate. Ritual mattered. It told the body there was order, even when the mind wanted chaos. "You work," she whispered. "I'll listen." The convoy moved without headlights, guided by night vision and memory. The desert swallowed sound the way it always did, vast and indifferent. Atlas rode beside her in the back of the vehicle, steady despite the vibration, ears twitching at every change in pitch or rhythm. Watched the horizon through green-tinted lenses, thinking, not about the mission, but about the margin for error. There was always less of it than people admitted. They dismounted 2 clicks out. The team spread into formation, boots finding ground without crunch, breath controlled. Atlas dropped immediately into work mode, nose low, body fluid. Let the leash slacken just enough to give him autonomy without losing connection. Trust wasn't passive, it was active restraint. They advanced slowly, too slowly for some. She could feel impatience ripple behind her like static. Atlas stopped, sat, raised her fist. The column froze. She crouched, scanning the ground, nothing visible, no disturbed soil, no wires. But Atlas didn't sit without reason. She trusted that. IED, she whispered into her mic. Likely buried, minimal signature. The senior operator moved up beside her, studied the ground. You sure? Nodded once. He is. A beat. Mark it, Holt ordered quietly. They rerouted. No complaints. That alone said more than words. Further in, Atlas alerted twice more. Each time they found something, pressure plates, hidden wiring, crude but lethal. Whoever had built the compound knew their craft. They just hadn't planned for a dog that worked differently. As they neared the outer structure, Atlas slowed. His posture changed. Not alert, not alarmed. Concerned. Felt it instantly. What is it? She breathed. Atlas whined softly, barely audible, and glanced back at her. She followed his line of sight. A vehicle parked too neatly, too clean. Her stomach tightened. VBIED, she whispered. High probability. Holt adjusted the plan on the fly. No hesitation, no questioning her call. That trust landed heavy in her chest. They breached through a side entry. Controlled chaos, voices shouting, someone dropped, someone ran. Atlas pulled hard now. Tracking. Target fleeing called. Atlas has sent. Holt made the call. You're clear, go. She and Atlas moved as one, slipping past debris, through shadowed corridors, out into the back of the compound where the ground sloped downward toward a dry ravine. The runner stumbled ahead, armed, panicked. Atlas surged. His heart pounded not from exertion but calculation, distance, angles, risk. Hold, she commanded. Atlas slowed but didn't stop. She adjusted, flank. He obeyed instantly, circling wide, cutting off escape without closing distance. The man turned, raised his weapon. Atlas lunged. Didn't hesitate this time. Engage. It was fast, brutally efficient. Atlas took him down without lethal force, pinning, controlling. The weapon clattered away. Was there in seconds, cuffing the man, breath ragged now. Good, she whispered, good. As they secured the target, gunfire echoed from the compound behind them. The radio crackled, status updates, commands, confirmations. Mission unfolding. Atlas stayed alert, body tense but under control. Blood from the man's lips smeared onto his muzzle. He didn't care. Did. She wiped his face gently with her sleeve, once the immediate danger passed. Still with me? She asked softly. His tail flicked once. Extraction came fast after that. The vehicle-borne device was rendered safe. The compound cleared. No casualties on their side. As they loaded back up, exhaustion hit her like a wave. The kind that didn't shake you, but hollowed you out. The senior operator sat across from her now, helmet off, face streaked with sweat and dust. He studied Atlas for a long moment. That dog saved our asses. Nodded, he did his job. He looked at her, really looked this time. So did you. She swallowed. Back on base, as dawn crept in pale and quiet, returned Atlas to the kennel and sat with him as the adrenaline drained away. Her hands shook now. She pressed them together, breathing through the aftermath. Because success didn't erase fear, it just proved you could move through it. Atlas rested his head on her thigh, heavy and warm and real. You trusted me, she murmured. That wasn't fair to ask. But he didn't know fairness. He knew partnership. Outside, the base woke slowly. Another mission done. Another line crossed. Another quiet shift in perception that wouldn't make reports but would linger in memory. Leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. She wasn't invisible anymore. But that wasn't the victory. The victory was this: earning trust without demanding it, holding control without cruelty, proving that strength didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply stayed steady when everything else tried to break loose. And sometimes that was enough. Why did the quiet after success feel more dangerous than the mission itself? Woke to the sound of Atlas breathing. Not the sharp inhale of alertness, not the restless shift of anticipation, just steady, unremarkable breath, warm, alive, close. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then the ache set in, muscles stiff from crouching, jaw sore from clenching, the low thrum of exhaustion that sat behind her eyes like a second heartbeat. The kennel lights were dimmed for morning cycle. She must have fallen asleep sitting up, back against the wall, Atlas curled beside her like he decided the night wasn't over yet. She exhaled slowly. They'd done it. No casualties, clean extraction. A report that would read calm and procedural, stripped of the moments that mattered, the hesitation before a command, the decision not to rush, the choice to trust something that couldn't explain itself. Success was supposed to feel lighter than this. Atlas lifted his head when she shifted. His eyes searched her face, alert but soft. He pressed his nose briefly against her wrist, checking. "I'm fine," she whispered, "just tired." That was the truth, and also not. When she stepped out of the kennel an hour later, the base felt different. Not welcoming, not hostile. Aware. A few nods followed her. Someone held a door without comment. Another stepped aside on the path instead of making her go around. Small things. The kind that used to pass her by without register, now suddenly heavy with meaning. Respect didn't arrive all at once. It leaked in through cracks. She headed toward the after-action briefing, Atlas walking at her side, leashed but relaxed. His vest was off now, replaced by a simple collar. No camera, no armor, just a dog again, at least on the surface. Inside the briefing room, the team sat scattered instead of tight formation. Helmets and gear lay piled near the wall. Coffee steamed from paper cups no one bothered to finish. Holt stood at the front, reviewing footage on the screen. Drone angles, helmet cams, Atlas's feed. When entered, the room stilled, not awkward this time, just attentive. "Lieutenant," Holt said, "take a seat." She did. The footage rolled through the breach. The alerts, the reroute around the buried device, the flank maneuver, Atlas's controlled engagement. Each moment slowed, replayed, analyzed. The senior operator spoke up. "At timestamp 1412, why didn't you release earlier?" Answered without defensiveness. Because the subject hadn't committed to the threat yet. Engagement would escalated prematurely. He nodded slowly, and if he'd fired, then the risk would shifted, she said. So would my call. No challenge followed. Another operator leaned forward. "You trusted the dog over visual confirmation." "Yes." "That's risky." "Yes." A pause. "Worth it?" Holt asked. Didn't answer immediately. She thought of the hidden wires, the vehicle parked too clean, the way Atlas had looked back at her before the runner broke into the open. "Yes," she said quietly, "because he had information I didn't." Holt studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "That's all." The meeting broke shortly after. No congratulations, no speeches, just a collective understanding that something had shifted. As they filed out, the senior operator fell into step beside her. "I was wrong," he said. Glanced at him, waited. "I thought you were trying to prove something," he continued. Turns out you were trying not to. She allowed herself a faint smile. Proving things makes people reckless. He looked down at Atlas, who glanced back, ears relaxed. That dog's dangerous. Met his eyes. So are we, that's why restraint matters. He nodded once, then walked away. Later that afternoon, received the message she'd been expecting and dreading. Command wanted Atlas evaluated for expanded deployment, more missions, higher tempo, less recovery time. She stared at the screen longer than necessary. This was the cost of success. Once something worked, it got used again and again until it broke. She found herself back at the kennel as evening fell, sitting cross-legged on the floor, Atlas sprawled beside her, gnawing on a rubber toy. "They want more," she murmured, "of both of us." Atlas didn't care. He tugged harder at the toy, tail thumping once. She laughed softly, then stopped. The laughter faded into something heavier. Because she'd seen this before. Dogs pushed too far, handlers burned out, bonds treated like tools instead of lifelines. She rested her hand on Atlas's, feeling the steady rise and fall. "I won't let that happen to you," she said, not as a vow, as a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. That night, sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it brought memories. A different kennel years ago, a different dog, same mistakes. She woke with her heart racing, hand reaching for fur that wasn't there, until it was. Atlas shifted, pressed closer, grounding her. She breathed. Morning brought another briefing, another potential operation, different terrain, same stakes. Holt pulled her aside afterward. "You don't have to say yes to everything." Looked at him, "Someone will." He nodded. "That doesn't make it your responsibility." "It does if I know what Atlas needs," she replied. Holt studied her. "And what do you need?" The question caught her off guard. "I need," she said slowly, "to not repeat the past." He didn't press, just said, "Take the afternoon, both of you." That was new. Out on the edge of the base, away from noise and concrete, let Atlas run. Not training, not drills, just movement, freedom within bounds. She watched him stretch into his body, joy unforced, instinct unhindered. For the first time since the mission, her shoulders eased. This was what success was supposed to protect. Not ego, not reputation. Capacity. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the dirt, realized something uncomfortable and necessary. The hardest part wasn't earning trust. It was protecting it, from command, from expectation, from herself. Strength, she was learning, wasn't proven in moments of action. It was proven in what you refused to sacrifice afterward. And as Atlas trotted back toward her, tongue lolling, eyes bright, she stood and clipped the leash on gently. Not to restrain him, but to walk forward together, without letting the world decide how much they were allowed to give. Why did the next call feel less like an order, and more like a test she couldn't refuse? The alert came just after midnight. Not loud, not urgent, just a soft chime on her tablet, the kind designed not to startle but to inform. Stared at it for a full 5 seconds before touching the screen. Atlas lifted his head from the floor where he'd been sleeping, ears pricked, already reading her posture. She hadn't told him yet. The message was brief, coastal insertion, high-value package, unknown variables, limited intel, K9 requested. Requested. That word carried weight now. Sat on the edge of the bunk, elbows on her knees, tablet glowing in the dark. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes tired, jaw tight, a thin line forming between her brows that hadn't been there a year ago. She thought of Holt's words, "You don't have to say yes to everything." She thought of the unspoken follow-up, "But someone will." Atlas stood and walked over, placing his front paws lightly against her thigh, not demanding, checking. She rested her forehead against his. "I don't know if this is right," she whispered. He breathed warm, present. That was the problem. He trusted her completely, which meant every decision she made carried twice the consequence. The insertion was rough. Sea state higher than forecast. The kind of night where the water swallowed sound and spat it back distorted. They came in low and fast, rotors barely skimming air, then down into darkness broken only by lights and whispered commands. Atlas moved differently on sand, lighter, more alert. The salt air sharpened everything. Felt the team watching her, not with doubt this time but expectation. That was worse. They advanced toward a cluster of abandoned structures near the shoreline. Intel suggested a transfer point. Weapons, maybe personnel, maybe nothing. Uncertainty was the real enemy. Atlas slowed almost immediately. Raised her fist. The team froze. She crouched, scanning. The wind carried too many scents: seaweed, rust, oil, human but old. Atlas sneezed once, then twice. False positives were common near water. Waited. He moved again, this time more cautiously. His body language shifted, not alerting but uneasy. "What is it?" she murmured. He didn't look back this time. His attention was fixed on the largest structure ahead. A warehouse, half collapsed, doors hanging crooked. Stomach tightened. They approached from the flank. Atlas stopped again, sat. This time his ears flattened slightly. That wasn't fear. That was recognition. She felt a chill creep up her spine. "Possible human presence," she whispered into the mic, "but something's off." Holt's voice came back calm. "Clarify." "I think," she said carefully, "there's more than one layer, something masked." Silence. "Then proceed with caution." They breached quietly. The interior smelled wrong, too clean in places, too controlled. Atlas pulled left, away from the obvious path. Followed without hesitation. That was the moment she felt it, the subtle shift in the team's formation behind her. They adjusted automatically, trusting her read without needing explanation. That trust landed heavy. They found the first body near the back wall. Alive, bound, gagged, eyes wide with terror. Not an enemy. Atlas whined softly. Knelt, cutting restraints quickly. The man collapsed forward, shaking. "Easy," she whispered. "You're safe." But even as she said it, Atlas stiffened. He turned sharply. Growled. Looked up just as the second figure emerged from the shadows, closer than she liked, weapon raised. Everything compressed. "Down," someone shouted. Atlas lunged. Didn't issue the command. The shot went wide. The engagement was chaotic but brief, the threat neutralized. Silence rushed back in. His heart hammered as she grabbed Atlas's collar, grounding him, checking for injury. He was fine, focused, ready. But something had changed. He paced, sniffed the air, whined again. "Another," she breathed. They found them moments later. More bound figures, civilians, fishermen, used as cover, as leverage. This wasn't a weapons transfer. It was a trap. The realization hit her like cold water. "They wanted us here," she said into the mic. "This was bait." Holt responded instantly, "Now." Too late. The sound came first, a low mechanical whine, then the lights flared. Atlas barked sharply, body coiling. Felt panic claw at her chest, not for herself. For him. The exit collapsed inward in a shower of debris. Smoke filled the space, screams, shouting, confusion. Atlas tried to surge forward. "Stay," she commanded, voice sharp now. He obeyed, but barely. His thoughts raced. Too many bodies, too little space, civilians in the line of fire. This was the line she'd feared. Commanding restraint when instinct demanded action. "Atlas," she said, forcing calm into her voice, "with me." She guided him through the smoke, shielding him with her body as much as possible, coughing, eyes burning. They found a secondary exit, partially blocked but passable. Shoved debris aside with one hand, leash tight in the other. Go, she urged the civilians. Now. One hesitated. Atlas barked sharp, commanding. The man moved. The last civilian cleared the opening just as another explosion rocked the structure, was thrown forward, hitting hard. Her head rang. Atlas was on her instantly, nudging, whining. I'm okay, she gasped. I'm okay. But she wasn't sure. The team regrouped outside under fire, chaos but controlled. They under cover, civilians secured, casualties minimal. Back aboard the extraction vehicle, finally let herself collapse against the wall. Her hands shook violently now. Atlas pressed against her, weight solid, anchoring. You did good, someone said. She didn't know who. She barely heard it. Back on base, the aftermath was louder than the mission. Questions, reviews, raised voices behind closed doors. Sat alone in the kennel afterward, Atlas asleep with his head on her thigh. She stared at the floor. She'd hesitated. Not long, not fatally, but long enough to feel it. The image replayed in her mind. The raised weapon, the civilians, Atlas launching without her command. What if it had gone wrong? What if trust had turned into tragedy? Her chest tightened. I was afraid, she whispered, not of them, of failing you. Atlas stirred but didn't wake. She rested her hand on his side, breathing with him until her pulse slowed. Later, Holt found her there. You made the right calls, he said. She didn't look up. I hesitated. Yes, he agreed, and you still acted. That won't always be enough. No, he said gently, but it's human. She finally met his eyes. What if next time it costs him? Holt was quiet for a long moment. Then, he said, we'll have to ask whether the mission is worth the bond. That was the first time anyone had said it out loud. After he left, stayed where she was, listening to Atlas breathe. Strength, she was learning, wasn't the absence of fear. It was carrying fear carefully, so it didn't spill onto those who trusted you most. And tonight, that weight felt heavier than ever. Because the closer you came to losing something, the clearer its value became. And knew now, without question, that if the day came when she had to choose between success and Atlas, the answer would break her. But it would be clear. Why did the hardest decision come only after the fighting stopped? The base was quiet in a way that felt earned and uneasy at the same time. Not the lull between alarms, not the calm before a storm. This was the stillness that followed consequence. Paperwork moved faster than voices. Boots struck concrete softer than usual. People spoke in lowered tones, as if the air itself might remember what had almost gone wrong. Stood alone on the far edge of the training field, Atlas sitting at her left. No leash, no vest, just the two of them framed by the pale morning light. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the moment replayed, the fraction of a second where instinct and judgment diverged, the split where she felt the bond stretch thin under pressure. It hadn't snapped, but it had stretched, and that scared her more than any explosion. Atlas watched the horizon, ears flicking as birds passed overhead. He was calm, unburdened. He had done exactly what he was trained to do, which meant the weight rested with her. She turned. Holt approached without hurry, hands empty, expression unreadable. He stopped a respectful distance away. They've made a recommendation, he said. She nodded. I figured. Expanded deployment, higher tempo. Atlas would be attached to multiple teams, rotational handler support. The words were clean, clinical, efficient. Felt something inside her go very still. That would break him, she said quietly. Holt didn't argue. It would change him. And if he changes, she replied, he becomes the dog they're afraid of, not because he's dangerous, but because he's confused. Holt watched Atlas for a moment. The dog glanced back then returned his gaze to the horizon, content. "You be sidelined," Holt said. "At least temporarily, training advisory role, stateside." The offer was there: safety, distance, a way to protect Atlas by stepping away from the line entirely. Swallowed. This was the test she couldn't train for. "I won't let him be passed around," she said, "and I won't pretend I can protect him from that by disappearing." Holt exhaled slowly, then say it. Closed her eyes. She thought of the first day in the briefing room, the laughter, the doubt, the way Atlas had pressed his nose to her hand like a question he was afraid to ask. She thought of the civilians running through smoke, the leash tight in her fist, the trust that had held when everything else fractured. She opened her eyes. "Retire him," she said. The word fell heavy between them. Holt's jaw tightened. "He's young." "He's been through enough," she replied, "and so have I." Silence stretched. "You know what that means," Holt said. "Yes." No more deployments, no more proving, no more missions where trust could be weaponized. Just the quiet work of healing, of rebuilding something whole instead of useful. Holt nodded once. "I'll make it happen." When he walked away, stayed where she was, hand resting on Atlas's back. He leaned into her touch without looking. They walked later, beyond the fence line where the base ended and the land opened up. No commands, no structure, just movement. Atlas ran, stopped, ran again, checked back in without being called. Laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar in her own ears. Weeks passed. The world didn't end. Atlas adjusted faster than she expected. The edge softened. The vigilance gave way to curiosity. He slept deeper, played harder, learned that not every door meant danger. Learned too. She learned how much of her identity had been wrapped around being needed, how quiet felt like failure until she let it become space. She trained new handlers now carefully. She taught restraint. She taught listening. She told them this: control isn't what you take, it's what you're trusted with. Some understood, some didn't. That was okay. One afternoon, months later, she stood at the edge of the field again, watching a new team run drills. Atlas lay at her feet, head on his paws, eyes half closed. A young operator approached hesitantly. "Ma'am." "Yes." "I heard about the mission, about the call you made." Waited. "Would you do it again?" he asked. "Give up the dog?" She looked down at Atlas, at the scar on his flank, at the calm in his breathing. "I didn't give him up," she said. "I chose him." The operator nodded, thinking it over. As the sun dipped low, casting the field in gold, felt something settle inside her. Not pride, not regret. Peace. Because strength, she'd learned, wasn't measured by how much you could endure. It was measured by what you refused to sacrifice, even when the world told you it was necessary. Atlas stood, and pressed his head into her side. She rested her hand on his neck and closed her eyes. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.